everybody, and welcome in to Last Call. I'm Nathaniel Finch here with Jake Kiefer, and we've got a loaded show for you today. We're going to start by talking about UIndy and their win against Southwest Baptist. We'll tell you how they're going to play against McKendree next week. Then we'll talk about some D1 games, how the weekend went for Indiana schools and the rest of Division I, including a couple powerhouses at the top. That's when we'll talk about the Colts after that and the rest of the NFL before we talk about Monday Night Football. A loaded show today. Let's get right into it. How about UIndy? They went and hosted homecoming. Southwest Baptist came to town, won 44-17, and boy, it was a great game for Greyhounds fans, including Toriano Clinton, who broke two more records career-wise. He broke the record. He's now first place for all-time total touchdowns as a Greyhound, and he's also first place with rushing touchdowns. Had a 3-touchdown day, 2 on the ground, 1 through the air. Just feasted against Southwest Baptist yet again.
Yeah, all hail King Tory. You know, he's had a very great career, and he might be, I venture a guess here, he's probably the best running back to ever come through this program, and he's just continued to build upon what's been a great career and a great start to the year. I mean, I could see him adding maybe even 1,000 more rushing yards in these next few games.
It's wild. He had 207 over the weekend against Southwest Baptist, and it was just a very impressive day from him, and it's crazy how good he is. There's just no way to stop him. Everyone knows it's going to go to Toriano.
You just can't stop it.
No.
You can't, no matter what, you can scheme for him all you want, but he's going to find a hole and he's going to break off some big runs. And I think that has a lot to do with the Hogs in front, you know. Yeah. He's always given love to his offensive line, and they've always blocked their butts off for him. And I think he's appreciated that and realized that, and that's definitely a big part of his success here at UIndy.
UIndy only had 94 passing yards from Connor Kennett, and that's just because they didn't need to throw the ball. They had a guy like Toriano slicing him up, and what was crazy was that they would turn around and hand the ball off to Lenny Bennett after that, the backup running back. He would come in and have not the same success, but still plenty of success in his own right. They would get these second, third, fourth string running backs in and just doing just as good. So testament to what you said there with those Hogs up front. And you mentioned how they're blocking their butt off. That's the exact quote that Connor Kennett used in the post-game show when we had him interviewed for the UIndy TV broadcast, but it was one impressive day. Yeah,
373 rush yards as a team. You know, you said whoever stepped in to that running back spot just really had a day, and I think it was great to see. The defense played very well as well. A safety, 2 interceptions, 5 sacks. Also, they held Southwest Baptist to 66 rush yards. I mean, that's got to be some type of a very driving point of practice for Coach Keevers for them to really hammer that home during the game.
And they were banged up in the secondary, missing 2 starters from the beginning of the year, and they just seemed to be able to come in and have some great plays in that secondary. I thought it would be more of a struggle. I thought Cooper Collis would have well more than what he did in terms of passing. He still had 241 yards, but just 1 touchdown. They really seemed to bottle them up pretty well, especially because of that negative game script where Southwest Baptist was throwing from the get-go, and UIndy was able to do their part on defense, got some key turnovers. One player who had a great turnover was Carice Crawford, and he had an interception late in the game, went running down the sideline trying to score, even though the game was well out of hand. He was just trying to get his hand in the pot as well, get some scoring. And he kind of landed awkwardly on the tackle, got hurt, and was helped off the field. All signs point to that he's doing all right, so it doesn't seem like it seems like he avoided a major injury. Of course, we can't, I don't know that for sure, but just talking to some people after the game seems like he was doing pretty well. He was able to walk around on his own power that night, too.
Yeah, that's great. I just think it was an excellent performance all around for the entire team, and it's a good segue into the McKendree preview. They're playing McKendree next week, of course, at McKendree. McKendree's no slouch themselves. They come into this game 4-1. Their only loss coming to Delta State, who was ranked at the time 58-34. So kind of a blowout, but not really if you look at the stats. I mean, you know, they actually, though that was their loss, pardon, they actually are coming off a win against 1-4 William Jewell, who is obviously not the strongest team in the GLVC, but still put up some points as well. I mean, Turner Poland is a great quarterback. I know sitting in the booth last year with you calling their games, we saw a lot of Turner Poland and a lot of what he can do, not only with his arm, but with his legs. He's mobile back there, kind of sneaky athletic, but you know, he's a good quarterback.
And Turner Poland is top 3 in the nation in passing yards right now. So for UIndy, you really want to hope that you can get some of those starters back in your secondary. They've got the great safety tandem, but cornerback's just injured. And, of course, they played very well over the weekend. But you don't want to count on that to be a week in, week out thing. So you want to get your starters back, and we'll see if they can have any sort of sway against Turner Poland, keeping him from doing what he's been able to do so well this year.
Yeah, the scary thing about Poland to me is he threw for 343 yards. You know, that's a respectable number. That's a good number. 25 for 35, so only 10 incompletions, but 5 touchdowns.
Yeah.
So obviously they have the receiving core that's capable of, you know, creating some space, getting away from the coverage, breaking past them, or is just physical enough to go up and grab some balls.
I will say, though, McKendree's defense, not a top-level unit, especially compared to the Greyhounds, who have such a lethal front seven. So it's kind of an opportunity for UIndy. Maybe try to pick on that defense. We might see a very high-scoring game in McKendree.
Yeah, McKendree's defense gave up 225 rush yards last game to William Jewell, and it's not not the strongest William Jewell team. I would say that running the ball is probably their strong suit, but you know, Toriano Clinton's capable of breaking off 200 yards in the first half. Heck, we've seen him do it in the first quarter, even, or close to it in the first quarter. So things bode well for the Hounds. That's what I'm seeing. They also gave up 288 pass yards as well. So, you know, we could see Connor Kinnett really throw some deep strikes and connect and get some nice strikes thrown to his receivers.
The Greyhounds went into the weekend ranked 14th in the nation, still waiting to see what that final ranking is, if they're going to move up.
I believe it actually just came out. They are now the number 8 team in the nation.
Number 8.
So top 10 for the Hounds. Let's see if they can build on that and maybe even enter the top 5. Who knows?
Yeah, and of course a big loss in the GLVC can definitely vault you back down that list. But the Greyhounds are definitely going to be pretty heavy favorites in most of these games. So you got to imagine they can continue to climb and climb and climb, and we might be seeing a playoff game here at Key Stadium.
I mean, they were preseason picked by far to win the GLVC. You know, the departure of Lindenwood to D1 really helps with that. But all signs are pointing to at least a first-place finish in the GLVC. Of course, you know, dropping a game, like you said, could really affect that and maybe even boot them out of the top 25.
It's a lot of fun to see a team with that ranking next to it, especially a single-digit ranking. So excited to see how the Greyhounds can do moving forward. They're going to play in Michigan at Saginaw Valley State the week after, and then we got them at home. You can watch that home game here on UIndy TV as well. So a lot of good games here in the near future for UIndy, including that McKendree game. Let's move on. We'll just go ahead and step aside when we come back. Division I college football, including the Purdue and IU games. That's next here on Last Call.
Anybody can be a firefighter. Male, female, younger, older.
We have school teachers. We have leaders in business.
Is me, you, anyone that wants to be.
There is no typical firefighter.
Is there a danger hiding in your home? Unused opioid medicines could harm your family. Find your unused opioid pills, patches, or syrups and learn how to dispose of them safely at fda.gov/drug disposal.
Welcome back to Last Call. Let's take a look around Division I college football. Nathaniel and Jake here with you. Let's start with the Boilermakers. Purdue hosted a ranked Minnesota team, and I'm going to continue to say that because it's the highlight win of the season for Purdue at this point. I know it's kind of sad to say, but they defeated Minnesota on the road 20-10, and it ended up being a really good game for the defense.
Yeah, you know, I really think that the defense held their ground well against Minnesota. Minnesota's run game is actually probably the best, one of the best in the Big Ten. However, you know, I really think the offense held their own as well.
Yeah, and the defense, I mean, it's been a few games this season for Purdue where the defense is just kind of non-existent, especially late in games where they just don't show up. But today, I mean, they had plenty of critical interceptions. They picked off Tanner Morgan 3 times, and they were pretty important parts. One time was in the back of the end zone. The other time, you know, Minnesota was driving down the field trying to come out and score, and then the final time was inside of two minutes when, you know, Minnesota was trying to make a comeback. So the defense really showed out, had those 3 critical interceptions, played very well, and it was a big reason why Purdue was able to get the win because they didn't have the best day on offense for sure.
Yeah, you know, Aiden O'Connell, he really he's back from injury, of course, and, you know, he threw a couple interceptions, only 199 yards. Not the best performance, like you said, but I think everybody else on the offensive end really made up for it. Devin Mockabee especially, 11 rushes, 110 yards, 1 touchdown. Most of that 110, of course, coming on 1 long rush. But, you know, he found a hole, he committed to it, and I think he really showed out.
Yeah, and it was a close game late. That's when Purdue was able to kind of just move the ball effectively, and that's when it matters because they didn't have the best day on offense. They weren't the Kansas City Chiefs today. There were no Alabama, but they were able to move the ball when it mattered, and that's what kind of got them they only scored 20 points, but it was very critical at times in the game where they were able to do that and really put a stamp on it. So it was pretty important, especially it was around 3 minutes to go. They were only ahead by a field goal, able to punch in that rushing touchdown. So while they didn't look the best the whole game, they looked good when it mattered.
And, offensive errors are made up for on the defensive end. And like you said, and like we saw, the defense played excellent. And that really makes up for offensive lapses. So I think if Purdue continues on the route they're going with the defense and the offense steps up a little bit, they might be a force to be reckoned with in the Big Ten.
How about IU? How'd that game go? Tell me about the Hoosiers.
Yeah, man, it was a tale of two halves for the Hoosiers. They dropped a heartbreaker almost to Nebraska, 35-21. And in the first half, they did look good, tied 21-21 at the end of the first half. I, of course, didn't get to catch the first half. I was at work, but, I was keeping up with it on the phone with my mom, actually.
Oh, no.
She was giving me some play-by-play.
So you tell me that you saw the second half only. You didn't even get to enjoy the
good.
first half.
No, I didn't get to see the good.
That is heartbreaking.
No, and it's tough because in that second half there was literally no offense from IU whatsoever. Now on the Nebraska side, Casey Thompson, very good quarterback. Maybe not the best in the Big Ten, but probably up there for sure. But Anthony Grant, he's a workhorse, 32 carries, 136 yards. IU just plain didn't have an answer for him. And they also didn't have an answer for Trey Palmer. He was excellent. Casey Thompson really looked out for him the entire game. 8 receptions, 157 yards, one touchdown. What else can you ask for from the Nebraska man?
As far as IU goes, answer me this. You've got a guy, Jalen Lucas, had that 34-yard rush. Looked good in the first half. Where'd he go? What happened? Why don't you just hand him the ball more?
He disappeared. And he didn't disappear due to his own performance. He disappeared because he just wasn't put back in the game. There were a couple times he was put back in for pass protection, which really doesn't make too much sense to me considering his size. He's not the biggest guy in the world. He's fast. But, it's poor coaching and poor play calling for IU. That's the real thing. A lot of RPOs, and in order for an RPO to be successful, you have to have a run game.
Yeah.
There's no run game there whatsoever for the Hoosiers.
And when there was, then they just went away from it immediately.
Yeah, and it's poor coaching, poor play calling, and that falls on Tom Allen as the head coach. I think Tom Allen's the highest paid cheerleader in the country. And I'm going to leave it at that, to be honest with you, because I don't see any coming back from this. Honestly, IU had Kevin Wilson, who was an offensive specialist. They tried that, ignored the defense. That didn't work out. He's gone back at Ohio State, or was at the time. That's where he left. And now with Tom Allen, he's more of a defensive guy, and he doesn't focus on the offense. So you got to find a happy medium somewhere, and it's not with Tom Allen.
That final score, 35-21. Let's switch gears and talk about some of the best teams in the nation. How about we start with Alabama? And they were able to get a win and vault up to number 1 in the AP poll. We'll talk about why they had the opportunity to move up later. But Alabama had a pretty impressive win, although not quite the ending that you would want to see. Let's take a look at Bryce Young, who just seemed to be a little banged up and had to exit the game, and this could spell doom for Alabama.
It could, but it could not.
They still won the game 49-26, so you can't say that they weren't able to get things done. Backup Jalen Milroe came in and 4 of 9 for 65 yards and a touchdown. Also ran for 91 yards on 6 carries and a touchdown. He was a dog. And you see here as Bryce Young just kind of struggled with that, landed awkwardly on his shoulder. You'll see in the next play came in and tried to throw a pass and was just forced to the locker room after that. But for Alabama, you lose a top 2 Heisman candidate right now. C.J. Stroud, I think, is maybe the favorite. He's right there.
Yeah,
you
definitely
lose him for an unknown amount of time. We'll see what that does. But, you got to be pretty promising with Jalen Milroe there.
Well, the thing about an Alabama or, a top Division I team is they're going to have a 5-star all across the board for the starters.
Yeah.
They're probably going to have 5 stars as their backups as well. And I think Jalen Milroe fits the mold for Alabama. However, it's not the traditional Alabama quarterback step back in the pocket mold. Obviously, you see with the 91 rushing yards and along a 77, he's capable of creating with his feet rather than with his arm, although his arm does not look bad. I think he managed the game well. I think he really chose his spots well. He went at his receivers when they were open, and he took off when that first read wasn't there. So I think with Bryce Young out, if he misses significant time, Milroe will fill the role very well.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, pretty promising if they were able to win the game 49-26 against a good Arkansas team. So I'm sure that Nick Saban is not sounding the alarm bells. But also, I mean, again, you lose a top 2 quarterback in the league, and it's going to be interesting to see how they're able to fill his shoes. I think they'll be able to do all right. Let's switch gears and talk about Georgia, who was number 1 in the AP poll going into the week, and they just kind of struggled against a Mizzou team. 26-22 ended up winning just narrowly, but wasn't quite the Georgia game we're used to this year.
Yeah, and, let's set the record straight here. This is not a good Missouri team.
No.
They're not horrible, but they're not good. They're probably bottom 5 of the SEC, I would say. But, man, Stetson Bennett looked good, 312 yards. No touchdowns, though. He just couldn't find his receivers in the end zone. Now, Missouri did step up, in my opinion. They really did a good job in the run game and decent job in the pass game. A little GLVC connection, however. Cody Schrader, who transferred into Missouri from Truman State, he had 6 carries for 89 yards. I mean, he looked good. He might be pushing into that running back competition for Missouri. Who knows?
We knew he would be when he transferred there. Jake, you and I both got to see him a couple times where he would just go and put up yards against these GLVC teams. Even the Greyhounds, who have such a good front seven, such a good run defense, Cody Schrader would come in and cook some teams. And while that may be D2 talent, now he's going up against Division I, number 1 Georgia talent, and able to come up and put the numbers up he did. Cody Schrader's a dog, and I'm sure he'll be getting plenty more opportunities in the near future. Oh,
absolutely. He's got the big playability. I mean, you saw long of 66 yards. He really just found a hole, committed to it, and just exploded all the way almost to a touchdown. I think he was down at the 2 or 3 yard line, just short. But I really like Cody Schrader. I have, like you said, we've had the opportunities to watch him, and he reminds me a lot of Toriano Clinton, really. He's able to lower his shoulder, run people over, or make a cut, and
he's gone.
Yeah, absolutely.
And with Schrader, too, he's just such a great player. He does everything on his own. Not to say Truman State didn't have a good offensive line, but Cody Schrader, everyone knew that it was Cody Schrader's team, and he was the one that put the team on his back and really do everything for that offense, and I'm glad to see he's at Mizzou now able to do similar things.
Yeah, the game flow was kind of weird for Georgia. They didn't score a touchdown until the fourth quarter, and their defense was flat most of the game, which kind of contributed to Schrader's success and Missouri's success as a whole. I think with that performance, Georgia does deserve that number 2 spot, and that was recognized in the AP poll as Alabama is now the new number 1.
So we've got Alabama at 1, Georgia at 2, but kind of struggling. How do you think that this will affect the playoffs and really just the landscape of college football in general?
That's a good question. I think the 2 constants right now in the NCAA CFP is Georgia and Alabama, regardless of if they're 1 through 4. They're the blue bloods of recent history. And, Ohio State's in there. They haven't had the success in the playoff as they would have wished. But C.J. Stroud is just fantastic. And that 4 spot's the one that's interesting to me because you never really know, with a loss, who's going to be in that spot. It'll be very interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Pretty excited to see how the rest of college football shakes out. Should be an interesting year, and especially just with all this turmoil at the top. Let me ask you this. When Michigan wins 100-0 in Bloomington next weekend, are they going to move to number 1?
They probably won't move to number 1. They might move up to number 3. We'll see. Depends on how Ohio State fares next weekend, and of course Georgia and Alabama as well. But you're right. Michigan very well might put up 100 points on my Hoosiers, and years of being an IU fan, you kind of come to that realization, and you just accept it.
Big noon kickoff. We'll be covering that IU game. Pretty fun. The Fox crew in Bloomington. But we'll switch gears when we come back. Let's talk about the Colts and the rest of the NFL on Last Call.
Sorry, but before we start, you should know our terms and conditions.
I'm kind of in a rush.
You understand that by using the service, you may be exposed to content that is potentially dangerous, offensive, harmful to minors, unsafe, or otherwise objectionable, and you're using the service at your own risk.
What?
Let's go.
Ride-hail companies typically claim they aren't liable for their drivers. So read the fine print. Always ride responsibly.
Welcome back to Last Call. Let's take a look at the Colts, who did not look too good over the weekend. Let's roll the highlights and see how they did against the Titans. It was a 24-17 loss, and not a lot of promise here as we'll take a look at some of these highlights. Matt Ryan has kind of struggled in his early days with the Colts, and of course you expect that with a new team, but here we see here just a routine strip fumble that the Titans were able to pull away from him, and just the offensive line has not looked good so far this year for Indianapolis.
And the ball security issues as well.
Points off turnovers. It was Ryan Tannehill in the back of the end zone. And Robert Woods, how about that name, played for the Rams, tore his ACL. Now he's making some great touchdown catches for Tennessee. You know who else is making great plays for Tennessee? King Henry, as we see here, does it all himself. What a play that was to make the cut on the outside, and he was off to the races. Down 17-3, keeping an eye on the deficit. The Colts are not going to give up yet. However, the Titans aren't done putting up scores either. We see another interception here from Matt Ryan. This one a batted ball, so you can't blame him as much, but still, I mean, too many turnovers from Ryan and the Colts so far this year. That's kind of what put the pin on this game, was all these turnovers, because the Titans trying to increase that lead, and they do here. Look at that little sidearm throw. Not too bad from Matt Ryan over to Chigo Okonwo. He had an 8-yard touchdown to put it up 24-3. 24-3, this game's over, right? Well, not so fast. Mo Alley Cox and the Colts trying to come back on this one. You see the flag. It was a decline penalty because Mo Alley Cox had a 14-yard touchdown. That made it 24-10 going into half. So now you're thinking, all right, the Colts found a little bit of momentum going into half. Here's some coming out of it. Mo Alley Cox, again, the beast. A 7-yard touchdown reception, his second of the day. That made it 24-17. That's where the score's going to stay. Jonathan Taylor had himself a pretty poor day. He lost the football here, fumbled it away to the Titans, but just in general, the offensive line didn't look good. Taylor wasn't able to have his magic. He had 20 carries for just 41 yards in the game, and they just weren't able to get anything done here against the division rivals. And this is a game that they really needed to win. If they won, they would have been first place in the AFC South, and it's frustrating for Colts fans that they weren't able to put up the kind of game that did against the Chiefs last week. They were just completely flat, and a big reason was those turnovers, and unacceptable. Coach Frank Reich talked about it after the game, just about how it's hard to win a game like that when you've got the turnover differential so far against you. They weren't able to make plays on defense, and they obviously weren't able to make one on offense either.
Yeah, you know, it was a tough loss, like you said. I think ball security is a big concern for me with Matt Ryan. He's fumbled in what seems like every single game this year, if not multiple times. But that falls back on the offensive line. Offensive line has been dog water, for lack of a better word, the entire season. You know, Jonathan Taylor couldn't get going. That falls back on the offensive line. All of these problems will be solved if you put somebody in front of Taylor and Ryan to protect them and open up holes or pass block for them to get them some time to operate.
And what's so frustrating is that the Colts have had such a good offensive line. Top 5 for the past few years. You've got a guy like Quentin Nelson, maybe the best guard in the
Highest
nation.
paid, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. You've got a guy like Ryan Smith or Ryan Kelly, that is, Brandon Smith, all these great players along this offensive line, but then the holes are what's making it worse because you didn't replace your right guard when Glowinski left. You didn't replace Fisher at left tackle. They have so much cap space, and they just haven't put any money anywhere this offseason. I don't understand. Why leave that money on the table? That's not going to win you games.
$70 million in cap space. I mean, you got to figure out something to do with that money. If they were in the corporate world, that money would be gone from the budget.
And not to say that, you know, Chris Ballard's smarter than I am, I can promise you that, but let's say you pay up for a left tackle, and he doesn't pan out as much, but, I mean, he's got to be better than what they're working with now. This offensive line just isn't holding up, and I don't understand why. You got some dogs along it. They just can't fill up those holes.
Moves have to be made, that's for sure.
We'll move on. Let's take a look at the Ravens and Bills. Your Ravens and the Bills here. The Ravens, it's such a tough season for them because they lost at the buzzer to the Dolphins. Now they lost another close one to the Bills, and just not the way that they thought the season would play out. The Ravens are playing great football. They're just being outplayed just barely each game.
Well, great football on the offensive end.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously not from Lamar. He had 2 interceptions yesterday. One of those coming kind of in garbage time, trying to make something happen. But the defense is the issue. Where is that secondary? The Ravens spent so much money in draft picks on trying to, Marcus Peters. They're getting Brandon Stevens and drafting Kyle Hamilton, and it just hasn't panned out. They are allowing offenses to carve them up. It's ridiculous. I don't know what the answer is there besides spend more money.
And what's tough is that the Ravens had the early lead. That's been a constant theme here. They had the lead against the Dolphins, have a lead against the Bills, 2 very tough teams. Of course, can't expect a whole lot because they're playing good opponents. But you've got the lead, you lose it late, come in, and it's been a struggle. So we'll see if they're able to get things turned around. Let's take a quick look at the Seahawks and Lions. What a game that was, and not a lot of relevancy around here, of course, in Indiana, but that's just such a fun game here in the NFL when each team combined for as many points, as many yards as they did. It was such a great showing of offenses.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. Geno Smith's looking all pro yet again. He's had some great outings, 320 yards, 2 touchdowns. Jared Goff as well. Where was that Jared Goff in L.A.? 378 yards, 4 touchdowns. He did throw a pick, but man, 48-45 being the final score there. That was some high-scoring offense. The over definitely hit.
93 total points between those two teams, and it was such a fun game to watch as a football fan. Let's kind of switch gears. Let's take a look at the Packers and Patriots just for a little bit. And the Patriots, of course, started the game with their backup quarterback after Mac Jones got hurt. Brian Hoyer came in. He got hurt. So that brought in Bailey Zappi, and what a game he had. 10 of 15, 99 yards, and a touchdown. Almost led the Patriots to a win. Of course, Aaron Rodgers is a pretty good quarterback on the other end.
Pretty good. I'd say very good. He did throw a pick. However, I mean, he's doing so now without Devontae Adams, and I think he's faring pretty well. Allen Lazard's really stepped into a role for them. He's fantastic to watch.
For Aaron Rodgers ended up with 21 of 35 in the game, 251 yards, 2 touchdowns. It's kind of been his stat line this year. Not that huge yards total, only a couple touchdowns, but just enough to get the win, and they were able to do that in a very close game. A lot of fun to watch, too, as well.
Well, you add Aaron Jones' stat line to that. I think he's an excellent running back, and 16 carries, 110 yards, that's not a lot of carries, and that's quite a lot of yards, and a great performance for him.
Packers win 27-24 in overtime with that kick from Mason Crosby. They moved to 3-1 on the year. Still one of the best teams in the league, even without Devontae Adams, but not world beaters. They're just getting by, just barely, but it's enough, and a win's a win. It's what's going to count in the end. So let's switch gears when we come back. Monday Night Football preview. We got Rams and Niners up next on Last Call.
Most people wouldn't hitch a ride with a stranger. Sometimes convenience comes at a price, but the cost should never be your safety. What do you know about your driver? Do you trust him to get you home safely? Do you trust him with your life? 91% of Americans believe that there should be mandatory rules and regulations for drivers of ride-hailing apps. Know your rights. Make the right call when it comes to your safety. 83% of Americans believe that drivers of ride-hailing apps should undergo.
Back here at Last Call, finished up the weekend slate of college and NFL games, and not done yet, though. We've got Monday Night Football. The best part of Mondays, we get to see Monday Night Football tonight at the 49ers. We got the Rams and 49ers. Should be a great game, and, of course, these NFC West games, always amazing games. These two teams play each other very well. Shanahan versus McVay. Pretty excited to see how this game goes. What do you think?
You know, the line's set at 1.5 in the San Francisco's favor, and I'm probably going with that. You know, call me crazy. Cooper Kupp's great, and Matt Stafford's great, but I see Deebo Samuel having a huge game. You know, Deebo's torched the Rams previously. The past 3 matchups, he's had greater than 90 yards and 4 catches, and 33 catches total for 440 yards and 5 touchdowns in 6 games against the Rams.
Deebo, anytime touchdown, plus 120 on FanDuel. I like those odds.
I'm taking that.
It's definitely not a bad one to have. But for the Rams, they've just played so well against the Niners, and these teams, I mean, they play so close against each other. You mentioned how Deebo's always kind of getting those yards and touchdowns that he is against McVay's team. But for the Rams, they've kind of struggled at points this year. They're 2-1 on the year. They look terrible against the Bills to open the year. But the last 2 games, they kind of almost blown some leads. They've looked good at times, and then they've looked horrible at other times. However, the Niners just haven't looked that good really at all. I mean, I got to watch them firsthand with my Broncos, and the fact that Denver won that game 11-10 said something about the Niners. Of course, it was on the road in Denver, but for 49ers, they're at home here, and I feel like the Rams plus 1.5 it's a nice line I'll take.
You know, I think it's really a pick 'em at this point. You know, it could go either way.
Mm-hmm.
The one parlay that I'm placing tonight is Cooper Kupp anytime touchdown and Deebo anytime touchdown. Those odds are plus 323. Betting 100 to win $323. Those are great odds.
Yeah,
I'm taking that.
Definitely not a bad look. And of course, these 2 receivers, 2 of the best in the league. So you got to imagine a decent chance that can hit. I don't mind putting a little bit of money on that, seeing what you can make. I've got the Rams Jake has the Niners. We'll see who ends up winning that game tonight on Monday Night Football. Make sure to tune in. That is all for Last Call.